Welcome, folks. This is the More Money Show. That is the More Money Show theme. Give me more money. We're here to help you try to make more money. We're here to help you understand what's going on with finance, with the economy, with politics. So thank you for joining. Okay, so let's get right down to it. So much to talk about this week. Let me get to my two guests who, as I said earlier, are two really good friends. We've known each other. I think the three of us have been friends for 30 years. The great Grover Norquist, who runs Americans for Tax Reform, is a tax cut crusader. And Lisa Nelson, who runs the invaluable ALEC, which is a group that represents about 2,000 state legislators around the country. She has her finger on the pulse of what's happening in the states. Thanks to both of you for joining on this Saturday afternoon. Grover, I want to start with you because you and Larry Kudlow and Newt Gingrich and a few of us really helped put out this fire of raising tax rates, Republicans raising tax rates. I almost fell out of my chair when I heard that was on the table. Good work. Thank you for saving the country and saving the Republican Party and saving the economy. Where did things stand? How did you turn it around? Where did this even come from?
Steve, it was a 27-day attempted coup.
Right.
There were a handful of people, some of whom work in the White House and get paid by presidents, who decided that even though President Trump had campaigned 8 years earlier about taking the income tax down for all Americans and the business tax down for all Americans, and then now, when reelected, his campaign was, we're going to cut taxes on middle-income people, upper-income people, lower-income people, business class people, everyone. We have 20 videos of that comment, and he said it in the State of the State address. So anyone who worked for him knew his position was across-the-board tax cuts, not, hey, let's play smash mouth with different groups. And the way Kamala Harris, who ran against him in 2024, her position was, we'll let some of the tax rates go down for lower income people, but for higher income people and for small businesses in particular, keep yanking up there. And the president, and yet in the White House, there were staffers lying to Congressmen saying, the president would really like this. Why don't you go out and say something nice about it? He's getting phone calls from all sorts of press guys. I understand a lot of Republicans for this. I name them. The White House people told me there's lots of them. Name them. And every once in a while, someone would pop up who'd said something half-assed about, something could be on the table, but that doesn't really tell you too much. There was no rebellion.
Yeah.
This was never going to happen.
There was a rumor put out that the president might be willing to raise the highest income tax rate on, quote, millionaires and billionaires up to 40%. The highest rate it would have been in something like 30 years. And it would have been the first time since George H.W. Bush was president that Republicans would have raised taxes if this would have gone through. And a lot of us were just shocked by this. Now, it seems to me, Grover, well, let me turn to Lisa for a minute on this, because Lisa, you've been in these wars as long as we have. I think for now, this has been put to rest. But you look at the states where they're cutting tax rates. Everybody's cutting tax rates. Every time we cut tax rates, good things happen. And, you're very close to my good friend, the former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, who played a big role in stopping this. But what are your thoughts about this, Lisa?
Well, yeah, I couldn't agree with Grover more on the attempted coup. I think the good news is that with the three of us having been in Washington for as long as we have been, we know when to sniff out fake news, right? We know when someone's trying to pull the wool over and when there's, a coup or some kind of spin going on. I think the important thing is, weeding out the truth from fiction. And if there are some folks out there who think we should be raising taxes, pointing out the historical kind of dead switch that would be for the party. And I think it's good for you guys and good for ALEC and Committee to Unleash Prosperity and Americans for Tax Reform for jumping on this for 27 days, pounding it and pounding it back under the table, because this was something where they were trying to kind of breathe life into an idea that had to have been dead on arrival.
So Grover, Good point. And Grover, I wanted to, I know you've used this analogy before, and I use it a lot as well, because you were really one of the first people who started this movement to cement in place the Republicans as the anti-tax increase party. And it's almost like you're in your castle, right? You've got the high ground and you keep shooting down your enemy. And then, they keep saying, well, come down from the high ground. And we have an impenetrable fortress right now. And some of the fools, look, there are some people in the Republican Party. I think they're a slim minority, but there are some Republicans who want Republicans to come down from the fortress and, quote, fight fair and fight on level playing field. And why should we do that? This has been the issue that has propelled the Republican Party and unified the party for 35, 40 years?
If you look at who ran Congress from 1932, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt took over, until 1994, when the Republicans went,
right,
62 years. The Republicans won control of Congress twice in 62 years, a total of 4 years. 1994, 96% of Republicans had signed the pledge never to raise taxes. They looked at George Herbert Walker Bush, who won election in 88 because he wouldn't raise taxes in the Republican primary and said he'd refuse to raise taxes in the general. He got elected because of that. He broke his promise in 1990. There was a slowdown of the economy because of his tax increase, and he lost the presidential election to a nobody.
Right.
And then Republicans came back and said, we're never raising taxes. And here's how you can believe it. We watched what happened to the guy who won the Cold War and threw away the presidency on a tax increase. We're not doing that. And as you point out, the Republicans have never voted for a tax increase since 1994 till now.
Right.
And 18 years, they held both houses. 6 years, the Democrats held both houses.
Why would they be so stupid to come down from the fortress? Aren't they playing right into the Democrats' hands?
Well, there is an effort by the Democrat Party, by the left, to pay money to some people who claim to be Republicans or conservatives. Right. This is one of them. He gets his from the Democrats. And his job is to convince the Republicans that it's okay to raise taxes. Because he thinks it's the best for Republicans, or because the people who pay him know that you're stabbing the modern. First of all, he actually stabbed Trump in the back, but he's also trying to stab the modern Republican Party in the back. And he doesn't care because he's paid by the other team. So when you ask, why would anyone do this? The answer is they're not. It's not that they don't understand what they're doing. It's that they're playing for the other team.
Lisa, you and I have worked together over the years on the ranking of the states, the Rich States, Poor States report. And one of the things we found in that report is that especially the red states have been dramatically lowering their taxes. We now have 9 states that have no income tax at all. Those states do very well on the ALEC ranking of the best economic states. And then you've got states, unfortunately, a lot of our listenership is in these states, Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, and then, of course, California, that have continued to raise their taxes. And we find dramatic evidence in that report that the states with the highest income taxes that, quote, soak the rich are the ones that are in absolute decline. And the states like Texas and Florida and Tennessee with no income tax are the states that are booming. What's so complicated about this?
Yeah, it should be fairly obvious for the states to kind of figure it out. And I'll tell you, one state in particular, Utah, has figured it out for 18 years in a row. They've been ranked number 1 for 18 years. And, the Senate president out there every year gets his delegation together, his caucus together, and says, we can't rest on our laurels. What do we have to do to stay number 1? And we've got a calculator on our ALEC.org website that gives them, kind of the path to what they would have to do. If he had not been doing that, this is what I find so interesting. If he had not been doing that every year, he would have dropped to 33rd. Because so many states are competing.
That's amazing.
For that number 1 spot. And I'll tell you, Florida is right behind Utah. Arizona, when they had Governor Ducey there, was sneaking up. Tennessee, where Dr. Laffer, your good friend Dr. Laffer lives, has snuck up to a top 5 finish. So there's lots of states who are looking at how do we reduce our taxes? How do we get rid of the income tax? Like you said, 9 states. Mississippi made a huge play moving forward after Speaker Phil Gunn worked on it for about 4 or 5 years before he left the office. and they finally got it done. I think Tate Reeves has a phase in of getting rid of the income tax. So super, super excited about what the states are doing and how they're competing against each other for those top 5 spots. One final
Grover,
point, say New York is
they're number 50 out of 50. That's pretty pathetic. And I think New Jersey is what, like 46 out of 50? And I think Connecticut's like, yeah, they do it wrong. So, Grover, just to shift away from the politics of this issue of soak the rich to the economics of it and why it's bad policy, not just bad politics, Laffer, who Lisa just mentioned, has a great book out called Taxes Have Consequences. And I'm sure you're familiar with this, Grover. Many of our listeners may not be familiar with it, but what he shows over the course of the last 100 years since we made our major mistake and introduced the income tax in the first place, every single time, Grover, we have raised taxes, whether it was Herbert Hoover or whether it was Woodrow Wilson or whether it was Richard Nixon or whether it's Jimmy Carter. Every time we've raised taxes, bad things have happened for the economy. Every time under Coolidge, under JFK, under Reagan, under Trump, we've lowered taxes. Good things have happened.
That is exactly true. But to get back to the politics for a moment, it explains why would somebody vote for higher taxes? Obama said he was for raising the capital gains tax. And when someone said, but you do know that raising the capital gains tax will slow economic growth, and it will actually raise less money with a higher tax. Why would you do that? Because it's fair to bash those people, because it's a good thing to tear down people who are working hard. He literally defined the goal of taxation as not raising enough money to do the legitimate functions of government, of which there are a few, but rather as a tool to
punish success.
And there are two parties in the United States. Go back to the Revolutionary War. The Tories, the people who supported the British occupation, were known as FOG, Friends of Government. And now the Democrats, and they wanted the government, the king, to be rich, powerful, and in control. So why would a politician raise taxes, spend too much when they know it's bad for the country? Because they're representing the party of government. Each time the government raises taxes, the government got more powerful, not always richer, but more powerful. They want the government to be bigger and powerful. And that's why we shouldn't be surprised when we explain carefully to them, you know this will hurt the economy. And to them, the economy is that they eat.
So we got to take a quick break. Could you guys do one more segment?
Sure.
We'll be back with Lisa Nelson and Grover Norquist in just 1 minute. We're going to talk about what's going on in the States and some of the exciting news on education reform, which is some very good news. We'll be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC. Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend. Sorry, the weather along the East Coast is kind of a rainy, sloppy day. Good day to listen to the radio, but the sun will come out tomorrow. And by the way, I'm using that as a metaphor for the economy and the stock market as well. We've been talking with Lisa Nelson, who is the president of ALEC, which is an association of, I think, 2,000 or 3,000 state legislators around the country who believe in economic growth and prosperity and federalism. And of course, Grover Norquist, who is the president of Americans for Tax Reform. So, Lisa, let me swing it over to you. Thanks for holding over. Good news. Will you tell our audience the great news about what happened in Texas this past week and what this means for not just the kids in Texas, but a real harbinger of great things to come throughout the country on school choice?
Well, yeah, it's amazing. There are about 6 million students in Texas who now will have access to funding to be able, with their parents, to choose where they go to school.
Wow.
And that's something that the Texas legislature has been, and Governor Abbott, to his credit, have been wanting to do now for 4 or 5 years to get this passed. It came very close a couple of years ago. It came even closer. And then there was a political attempt and success of replacing some of the Republicans who voted wrong on this back last year. And we now have the votes, and the governor will be signing a bill, $1 billion. That's with a B. Has been set aside for those 6 million students, and it'll be signed into law next Saturday, May 3rd, which is just amazing.
Now, Lisa, the opponents of this bill, the Democrats and their pals in the teachers union, say this is going to hurt the public schools in Texas.
Yeah, well, as usual, they have it a little bit wrong. I mean, we all know, and I think all your listeners know, that when you're trying to, and just like the conversation we had on taxes, where states are competing with each other and want to get better, iron sharpens iron. And if you have a better product, people are going to flock to that better product. And I think that the public schools would be smart to see this as a way for them to kind of raise their standards, raise their teaching, raise their skills, and offer a better product. And I think a lot of parents want to send their kids to the public school. It's right there down the street. It's convenient. They might have been, products of public school themselves. I certainly was. But if you see that they're teaching stuff that you don't agree with, or you find that might be problematic for your family and your values, of course you're going to want to make a change. And I think, the interesting thing, Steve, is that this whole wave of choice and parental empowerment, and more of this education freedom dollars, the funding following students, it started in 2021. And from 2021 to 2025, we've had 16 states dedicate for students. And it was West Virginia was the first year in 2021. In 22, you had Arizona follow suit, doing a great job of getting that done. And then the big, huge year was 2023, when actually the states had now seen West Virginia, seen the results in Arizona, seen that there were more and more students being able to go to the schools. And you had Iowa, Florida, Arkansas, Indiana, North Carolina, Ohio, Oklahoma, and Utah all pass it. So we started working with, and then we've got 24 was Alabama and Louisiana. And this year we're hoping for it to be a banner year like 23, where Idaho has already passed education freedom, Tennessee, Wyoming, and now Texas.
So the problem, of course, Grover, is this is fantastic news. It is absolutely wonderful, and congratulations to ALEC and all the groups of the coalition. We worked with at Unleash Prosperity with ALEC and so many other great groups that were part of this. But what's interesting, Grover, is that list of states that Lisa was just mentioning. I didn't hear New York. I didn't hear New Jersey. I didn't hear Connecticut. It's almost like these teachers' unions have a stranglehold on these states. You lead the anti-tax movement. There's no louder voice for higher taxes than the teachers' unions.
Steve, you're right. They do have a stranglehold on politics. There shouldn't be labor unions in the public sector.
They should not. I agree.
No one to negotiate with.
Yes.
The politicians are on both sides of the table, giving money to the teachers union, who give money back to taxpayers.
Hey, by the way, Grover, let me just interrupt you for 1 second. You're making such an important point. As you both know, and most of our listeners know, I hail from the great city of Chicago. The mayor of Chicago, Grover, was the lead negotiator for the teachers unions. Now he's the mayor. He's negotiating with this. There's nobody on the side of the citizens and the taxpayers of Chicago. So guess what? They just gave the teachers this massive increase in pay without any performance standards whatsoever.
And that happened state after blue state after blue state. And frankly, for many years, it happened in red states because the Republicans go, well, what's the alternative? Maybe if we pay them more, they'll start to teach them. I'm not quite sure that ever made the mail go faster by giving pay increases to the unionized mailmen. But when you have a monopoly, public schools, the post office, it's very hard to improve. When you do improve is when you have competition. Email competes with post office, UPS. In some of those zones, the post office actually picked up its pace because it has real competitors. And in some areas where you have school choice and people can leave the government schools then the government schools get better. So this is a reform both of private schools, charter schools. So, the brain dead public schools wake up and have to pay attention and get serious about it when people have the option of leaving. So this is a huge win for freedom. President Trump did something I don't think he's getting enough attention and credit for. He took the law that Jimmy Carter signed in 1978 that said, okay, we can have unions in the federal government. Till then, it was completely banned, except it said for the Army, Navy, Air Force, and any department the president says is critical to national security. Well, the president took that law. It's a modern law. Every president has used it at some point a little bit. Okay, so it's not an unused law. And he said the entire Pentagon is kind of important to national security. No union. The entire Veterans Affairs, with unionized workers, have been so problematic that people have been dying. And veterans have been ill-served. He said, no more union to get in the way of taking care of veterans. Not happening anymore. PAS, kind of important for security.
Well, look, I want to send this back to Lisa because you're making a very good point, Grover. And you and I and the people at ALEC were there when Trump basically said what Trump's agenda is for the Department of Education is just send that money, that $100 billion a year that helps no kids in the classroom, and just send that to the parents and the local school districts and the states and let them spend the money more wisely, which to me makes a lot of sense. I mean, has the Department of Education ever helped any child in the local districts around the country? I just don't see it. So Trump has been kind of heroic on this. So if you add those federal dollars, Lisa, to what the states are spending, we could have a real revolution in our schools. And I want to add one other point. You know, and Grover knows, and I think most of our listeners understand that what has happened with our test scores is a national crisis. And this may be one of the ways of making sure that kids can actually read the diplomas when they graduate from high school.
Well, that's exactly right. And I think, everybody knows that President Trump has now asked Secretary McMahon to do everything she can to shut down the levers of the Department of Education and to move the different programs that are essential into different agencies. People don't remember that the Department of Education didn't even exist until Jimmy Carter brought it into life in 1973, and then it actually got established in 77. So in our lifetime, that Department of Education didn't exist, and then it came in. It's like the CFPB. We don't need to grow the government. And if we can at all possibly just, push that money, like you said, back to the states and give it back to the legislatures and the governors, then you're going to have a huge opportunity to disrupt the educational system and to really, really make inroads on making sure that.
Lisa, we just have 60 seconds left. I want to ask you one last question, if I may. Okay, so I'm going to play the devil's advocate, in this case, the real devil advocate, and say, well, the people who are going to be hurt the most by these programs are the minorities. This is a racist program to basically bring segregation back into the classrooms. What do you say to that?
Well, it's working exactly the opposite. And in fact,
right.
Read the reason that Ron DeSantis got elected in Florida back 1 or 2 terms ago. It was the single African-American mothers who were trying to get opportunities for their young kids to go to school. And they had the opportunity to do vouchers in Florida. And because of that, those women went out and elected Ron DeSantis because their kids had the opportunity to go to those schools. I would argue that this funding for students is exactly the opposite and it levels the playing field and basically says anyone can go to any school. Now they're passing, and I know you're running out of time, but open enrollment, which is another element to this to make sure that you can cross your boundaries or your border to go to school. So that's another.
Well, we got to take a quick. Quick break. Well said, Lisa. That's Lisa Nelson of ALEC, and also the great Grover Norquist of Americans for Tax Reform. To both of you, thanks so much for taking some time this Saturday afternoon.